Good evening. Welcome to the Other 24 Report. I'm Seymour Guff, and this is what's happening. A special report tonight on Prime Minister Trudeau's visit to the European Union Parliament in Brussels. He was supposed to speak to the EU on democracy, which is ironic, given what he and his tyrannical Liberal government has done to Canadian civil liberties recently. This fact was not lost on many of the members of the European Parliament in attendance, and they let him know it. The member from Germany, Christine Anderson, called Trudeau a disgrace to democracy.
I will now give the floor to Ms. Christine Anderson for her point.
Thank you. Based on Article 195, out that it would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And other members also weighed in on Trudeau's blatant affront to democracy.
Nažalost, danas su među nama i oni koji gaze te temeljne vrijednosti. Kanada, nekada simbol modernog svijeta, je pod vodstvom vaše kvazi-liberalne čizme proteklih mjeseci postala simbol kršenja temeljnih ljudskih prava i građanskih sloboda. Gledali smo kako konjima gaze žene, kako samohranim roditeljima blokirate bankovne račune, da ne mogu platiti djeci školovanje, da ne mogu platiti lijekove, da ne mogu platiti račune za struju i vodu, da ne mogu platiti rate kredita za svoje domove. Za vas su to možda liberalne metode. Međutim, za mnoge građane svijeta to je diktatura najgore vrste. Budite uvjereni da građani svijeta, udruženi, mogu zaustaviti svaki režim koji želi uništiti slobodu građana, bilo bombama, bilo štetnim farmaceutskim proizvodima. Hvala.
And with the Prime Minister of Canada, the way he's behaving right now, he's exactly like a tyrant, like a dictator. He's like Ceausescu in Romania. If even you doubt, if you raise doubts about the vaccines, you're outcasted. What's the difference between what he does and what happened under the Inquisition? See, on one side they say, well, we should not believe in God, but on the other side they say, believe in science. We don't have to. Science is not about belief. Science is about measurements, conclusions, hypotheses, and arguments. We got to a point right now where even if you say something, if you raise any doubts, you're already considered, as whatever, they label you in very different ways. This is not okay. And I have to tell you, that when I saw the protests in Canada, the way the truckers over there reacted, I got in touch with some of them, others contacted me. I congratulated them, and I want to use this opportunity to thank them. And I hope this movement for freedom and for rights is spreading all around the world. Because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that all these elected officials, they understand that they were elected in those offices to work for the people, not to behave like masters of slaves. Thank you.
While the world is witness to Trudeau's perverse, tyrannical behavior, back in Canada, Trudeau's lapdogs in the Canadian mainstream media were reporting on his success at the forum. What? The media embarrassment called the CBC reported that Trudeau received a standing ovation. In actual fact, 70% of the 705 EU members boycotted Trudeau's speech and left the auditorium, leaving Trudeau to speak to mostly an empty room. The CTV also did not report on the denouncement of Trudeau, but instead reported on Trudeau's comments on Russian sanctions with respect to the Ukraine conflict. Total omission of the events that called out Trudeau as a dictator of the worst kind and a disgrace to democracy. Seems to me that should be the news that was worthy. While the Globe and Mail finally crawled out of their liberal hole to report on Trudeau's EU lashing, and a little late to the game, but the National Post also provided some space for the Trudeau roast. But as of the recording of this broadcast, the most left-biased of the Canadian media, the Toronto Star, Canada's largest newspaper, it was crickets. I guess they decided that it was best not to report what really happened. Trudeau may be offended and take some of his money back. Thankfully, the independent news groups in Canada, including Rebel News, True North, and the Western Standard, are doing their best to provide Canadians who will listen the truth behind the wall of propaganda created by Trudeau's subsidized Canadian legacy media. Rebel News reported, Croatian MEP calls Trudeau a dictator for his handling of Freedom Convoy. And here is a segment from the Andrew Lawton Show on True North, who ran a special piece on Trudeau's disgrace at the EU.
MP from Romania who just didn't even go. He just decided this is not at all something that I want to do. His name is Christian Terhas. I have a Romanian colleague who's probably screaming at me right now at my horrible pronunciation of a Romanian name. But he wrote on Facebook, I refuse to validate the imposition of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who gave a speech in front of the European Parliament. The reason why I was not in the hall when he spoke, you can't come to teach Putin democracy lessons when you pass with horse hoofs over your own citizens who demand that their fundamental rights be respected. The difference between democracy and tyranny is not given by the geographical location of political leaders, but by the values that this promotes. This is a tremendously important point. He says the West is not a space of freedom as a geographical place, but as a civilization. So he's saying you can't be arrogant and just assume because you're a Western liberal country that you can lecture other people about how to be liberal and how to be democracy.
Thanks, Andrew. The Western Standard wrote, Trudeau pilloryed by European leaders. Where would we be without independent news groups in Canada? It was mostly left to the reports from other countries to tell the truth to Canadians of what actually happened at the EU session. U.S. media outlets reported the following. European politicians slam neo-Marxist Trudeau. And, from the New York Post, Trudeau is compared to the Romanian dictator, Ceausescu. All that being said, unfortunately, Canada is stuck with this dictator until at least 2025, due to the recent backroom deal he has made with Jagmeet Singh of the NDP, with them agreeing to form a coalition government with majority power in Parliament. They have been accurately described by the Edmonton Sun as the axis of weasels taking power in a broken democratic system. In the 2021 federal election, the Conservative Party of Canada received a greater popular vote with 33.7% compared to the Liberals' 32.6%, and the NDP received only 17.8%. And a recent survey of Canadians conducted by Main Street Research showed only 28% support for Trudeau and 36% support for the Conservative Party. Yet, now we see a Liberal NDP left-wing power grab in a desperate attempt to hold on to control. They see that the country is finally starting to wake up to their corruption and misleading propaganda. Our hopes are that the Conservative Party of Canada will choose a strong leader going into the next federal election to challenge what Rex Murphy has called the worst government ever. Become informed, Canada, and don't be easily fooled by Trudeau and the big media lies. Let's try to get our country back. So that's what's happening. This has been a special report from the Other 24. I'm Seymour Guff, signing off until next time. Keep asking questions, looking for answers. Everyone has 24 hours in their day. Which 24 will you live?